This week on the Eldritch Lorecast.
I have so many thoughts on this, so I don't know where to...
Dang it, Dael. You got me going.
Join us.
Us.
You said the H word, which is very important here. You said Hasbro.
My dad's a lawyer. I know what this works.
We won't get an updated SRD.
I found a full deer skeleton a couple days ago.
The 3 people in the world who have access to the document.
Paranoid about him falling over. There was a rumor.
Oh, boy.
A company that would be big enough to go to court with Wizards of the Coast.
I'm not telling you how to interpret it.
I'm worried for Ghostfire Gaming.
I feel like we're having like a therapy session for Ghostfire Gaming now.
Horse skeletons are disappointing.
I slept so well this weekend.
A tentacle-faced psychic.
All that and more right now. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Eldritch Lorecast, the #1 D&D and tabletop RPG podcast in all the world. That's right. If you want to calm your Furby down, have it listen to the Eldritch Lorecast, because Furbies just love listening to this podcast, let me tell you. My name's Ben Byrne, and I'm here joined as always by Shawn Merwin, Dael Kingsmill, and stepping in for James this week, special guest Gabe Hicks.
Gabe James.
We've replaced one James with another. Gabe, I have to ask you a question. If you're a fan of 5e, I'm making a bit of an assumption here. What would you say that you could point to as your like #1 third-party, non-Wizards of the Coast 5th edition product, whether it's a monster manual, an adventure, even something small third party, like something on DM's Guild that's sort of, you know, a one shot or a character creation tool?
I'm gonna be kind of brandy for a second.
Do it.
I'm gonna say the Dark Souls RPG from Steamforged, largely because I like the rules for your characters dying and then being revived. Because then it gave me a rule set to just make immortal characters in pretty much all of my games, regardless of how we were playing 5e. And it's like, you come back to life, but also now you're speaking in gibberish for the next hour. You come back to life, and for some reason, you have access to this weird thing. And there's like a 1 in 20 different chance of what it's going to be. And that is one of my favorite rule sets because I like making characters immortal or close. Because if they're immortal, then you can just keep killing them over and over again, and then you don't have to feel bad about it.
Balance goes out the window if there's no consequence.
Well, because the other thing is, like, in any sort of tabletop game, especially in 5e, if the person running and facilitating the story for you is creative, death is probably the like least terrible thing that can happen to you. You can get sent to another plane of existence. You could lose access to all of your magic. You could be permanently changed into a sheep, and then you have to live out your days. Like, all things considered, being impaled by a giant, not so bad. I get real creative.
Dael Kingsmill, if you had a favorite third-party product, and for the record also, this can be something that's unpublished, such as Dael Kingsmill's rework of the classes of 5th edition for those who may have access to it.
Yeah, the 3 people in the world who have access to the document. Those poor, unfortunate souls. I'm glad you say that I can choose unpublished things, because it will come as no surprise to people. I'm a home brewer. I use my own stuff. I love third-party stuff, and I collect a bunch of it. But for the most, in terms of stuff that I use, I write my own.
Shawn Merwin, how about you? I mean, you've worked on plenty of first and third-party content before. It can be something you've created, can be something else entirely.
Well, all the stuff that Ghostfire makes obviously is my favorite.
Yeah, of course,
but I narrowed it down to 3 things I wanted to mention. I'll do this really quickly. One is Espergenesis by Rich Lescouflair and Alligator Alley Entertainment, which is what Spelljammer could be if they wanted it to be. So it's science fantasy. It's, you know, ships flying and going to different planets and strange things happening on these other planets using the 5e rules. But if you want space combat, you can also have space combat. So if you're into that, check out Espergenesis. The second thing that I really loved was Uncaged. that anthology on the DM's Guild. Ashley Warren was the producer of the first one and helped all along the way. But so many great artists and so many great writers contributed to that. And I love taking these tropes, these stories that we've heard all our lives and just turning them on their ear. And the last thing I wanted to mention was the Monster Loot series from Anne Gregerson. So what Anne did was take the monster manuals and take all the monsters and then all the adventures that Wizards produced and what you could do with the loot from that, what you could do with the loot from, some dragon. And we had this back in the first edition days. If you buried a dragon's tooth, it would grow a warrior that would serve you. If you took the scales,
Classic.
You could make armor. Yeah, all this stuff. And Anne did that with all of these books, and it's a great series. And I had her come to work on the Monster Grimoire, based on what I saw from her doing that work. So if I failed to mention that, I would be remiss. So those three things, among so many others, I think are great things to look at in terms of game design or just being a player and getting ideas, being a DM.
Yeah, that's fair.
For folks who don't know, by the way, it's a mythological reference. You bury a dragon's tooth and it grows into a warrior. It's from the founding of Thebes with Cadmus, but also pops up again later on with the Golden Fleece.
Were they called myrmidons?
I don't know. Dael, you correct me.
So.
I'm probably
I'm going to look it up. I think they might be, but go on.
Cool mechanic from the board game Mythic Battles Pantheon. When you kill the Dragon of Thebes, you then spawn I think they were called Spartoi, was the teeth of the Dragon of Thebes when they were planted and they came up as skeletons. At least in the Hollywood movie. Anyway, just to quickly answer the question, I'm going to sound like a company man, but for the moment, I have not worked on any of these products, so I can mention the Player's Guide, the Campaign Guide, and the Monster Grimoire from Ghostfire for Grim Hollow, I think, are all incredible products. I think, Shawn, you've done an incredible job. And then honorable mention as well to Dungeons of Drakkenheim, which I want to run. I just finally got my copy of it that you might be able to see back here the other week. And I do want to run that at some point. I think it's a very well-crafted, sandboxy sort of adventure from the Dungeon Dudes. But speaking of things... Actually, Dante, give me 2 seconds. I've just seen my books look like they're slanting in my camera, and I'm real paranoid about them falling over. I'm sure they'll be fine, whatever.
Yeah.
Cross your fingers.
Up. Ben was right.
Yes, I thought so. The Myrmidons were, were they not, Anyway, it doesn't matter. Speaking of things, speaking of tabletop RPGs, Gabe, you recently just finished, as of a few days ago, your Kickstarter for the Session Zero system.
Yes.
How are you feeling right now, coming off the back of that successful Kickstarter?
I slept so well this weekend. I slept so well. It was a moment of pride and joy and relaxation. It had been a project that I had wanted to do for a year. I met someone to help me make it. We worked in it for 8-9 months. I was like, you know what? I've got money. I reached out to one of my favorite artists on Twitter, who is now a dear friend of mine after working alongside us for 3 months. The goal was 50,000. We ran through to 170,000. We are still going to have units to sell ourselves because we ordered one of the minimums of shipping. So we'll have a digital store set up. It is the first major IP from a company that I started with a friend of mine. One heck of a first major project, honestly.
Mm. Can you explain a little bit more about the Session Zero system for folks that may not be familiar with it yet?
Absolutely. The basis of this is prompts are a really engaging way to get new players and experienced players into world building, whether it's building your characters, whether it's building the NPCs, whether it's building the world around you. And sometimes that can be incredibly difficult, especially for a one shot. Or you're going to have people who come to the table with entire pages and pages of backstory. And that's not a bad thing. But then you'll also have that person who comes with one paragraph because they weren't able to figure it out, or they were stressed or didn't figure out who their person was going to be to fit into this world. The point of this game and system was to make it so that regardless of how much backstory you had, during your session zero, the moment when you're sitting down talking about what you're going to do in this game, in 30 to 40 minutes, everyone at the table will share a part of like where their character came from, someone that is significant in their character's life, and an event that changed their character. And then after going through all of those, there's a prompt for each of them. Everyone will then connect one of their prompts to another character at the table. Now, it doesn't mean that the characters have all this information, but now the players have this information to be aware of it. If they come across like an NPC that came up in someone else's story during that session 0, the players now know and have the notion to give that player and their character agency in that moment, so that you're not like, oh, this is someone that's significant to you. I accidentally leaned into this, or I accidentally took a moment that you were leaning into. Because sometimes communication is hard. Communication can be very easy, but communication is also a learned skill. There are 20 prompts for each stage. So like the legacy, which is where your character is coming from, the bond, which is someone significant in their life, and then the catalyst, which was an event that set them on this path. There are 20 different prompts for each. Each one is fully illustrated. So you can do this with a rollable table. You can play using the art book, or you can play using a card deck. I am so proud of it, but like, it runs with like largely fantasy inspiration, but we've run it with D&D, Pathfinder, Ironsworn, and Kids on Bikes, and it has worked for every single one.
Nice. Yeah, this seems super cool. I mean, having started several campaigns in the last couple of years, both doing the approach of like everybody knows each other, you're a pre-made group, and the approach of you're all adventurers, you meet in a tavern. Definitely that former just starts campaigns off on the right foot. I feel like a lot better. And so I love the idea of this system for being able to create that community at the table within the characters as well as the players.
Yeah. Plus, it's so much more effective when you get a structured sort of context for a lot of character interaction. It can be so helpful for role play, for guiding people into it. I've talked about it before, but this kind of safe jungle gym that you can play on, where you know where the monkey bars are in order to sort of play along with it and encourage that role play, because it can be scary, especially when you're starting off.
And if you have players who just want to get to the game.
It gives them a game to play for session 0, right? It gives them something that they can just leap in and start playing. Gives them something fun to do, something tactile, something engaging. Yeah. I don't know. I just think it's a really great idea. And I love anything that implements those ideas with art as well, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm a big fan of like the fiasco system of pre-generating relationships, but it is something that you have to really kind of work and get players to understand, and it's very wordy, but being like, hey, here's a deck of cards with a bunch of pretty pictures, and we're all going to find out about each other's characters together.
That makes sense. And something that we're even doing is we're writing an extra optional rule set for like, because the idea is that this is also people starting on their adventure. But in games like Pathfinder or like Cypher System, your characters might start at a higher level, or like, it's like, okay, we're starting this one shot at level 10. So we have optional rules of like, okay, so for this first section of prompts, actually pull 2 prompts for this, pull 1 prompt for that, pull 2 prompts for this. So then you're
so clever.
You're outlining the extra stuff that has happened in this experience, in that story. It's like, okay, you've been traveling together for a longer time. Let's talk about stuff that's happened in that leading up to it. And like I saw someone had mentioned like World of Darkness. It will definitely work with that, especially because World of Darkness is such it's an urban fantasy world. And one of the prompts is talking about like a rival. It's asking, who was someone in your life that has done something that worked against you? Did they succeed or did they fail? How did you react to that? And they're meant to be open-ended prompts. People always ask me as well, like, Gabe, can I interpret it like this? Absolutely. Because like the point of this, I'm not telling you how to interpret it. I want you to interpret it in a way that you're excited about, because that's what's going to give me as a storyteller so much more to work with.
Speaking of the art as well, the art is gorgeous, having looked at the Kickstarter page. Do you want to give your artist just a quick shout out by name? You mentioned them before.
Is Dakota Curry. You can find Dakota, DAKOTA CURRY. You can find Dakota on pretty much all platforms, Instagram, Twitter, ArtStation. Like Dakota is all over, and his work is so good. It's like upsetting how good it was, because he would just be like, hey Gabe, I finished like 3 pieces. I'm like, Dakota, it's been like 4 hours. You have time. He's like, yeah, but I got excited. But he's been like passionate and excited about this every step of the way. We have a group chat called Team Make Ghoul-ish. Team Make Cool-ish. Halloween is over. And like we were just like the whole time, I have never worked with like someone that has been as big a cheerleader of a project that they were on as well as Dakota.
Right.
I like the art, the level of detail that the art has is a testament to how much Dakota had cared about making this thing awesome.
Also, Halloween is never over, not in our hearts.
That's true. I found a full deer skeleton a couple days ago, so you're absolutely right.
A whole deer skeleton, not just 100%. The skull?
Yeah, the skull had bones on it too.
Ooh. Way creepier than a horse skeleton because it's got antlers.
I don't know. Horses are big.
Horse skeletons are disappointing. I'm going to take this stand. In terms of skeletons, horses, what are the worst skeletons?
Okay, that's not where I expected.
Never mind.
This conversation to go.
Look,
Dael, you made a friend
so
today.
in my spare time, I'm ranking skeletons.
You made a friend today, Dael.
I'm glad. You get me.
Well, folks are asking. The Kickstarter just wound up a couple days ago, but folks are asking, and you mentioned before you may have extra copies to sell. What are the plans at the moment for people to be able to get their hands on it if they want to down the line?
100%. The plan is we are going to have everything up on BackerKit. We are literally setting that stuff up like this week to get people so people can get access to that. Also, with one of our goals, we're going to have poster prints, like poster size prints of each of the art pieces that people are able to get through BackerKit as well if they want it. We have like delivery around like November-ish of next year. And I have no problem saying it because we've even talked about it. Like the point of this is to under-promise and over-deliver. There is always a chance that this stuff comes in early if like everything goes moderately well. But like I'd always rather say November and then it shows up like August than like August and it shows up November.
Well, it's called the Session Zero System. Gabe's Twitter handle will be just below his name in the lower thirds. So you can go follow him on Twitter to keep up with everything that's going on there. Speaking of things that are going well, there was a rumor this last week, and it does seem like it was a very strong rumor.
Irony.
But it started a conversation, and I think it's a conversation that I'm personally very interested in getting some more perspectives on. This rumor is about the open game license and the system reference document, although I think specifically they were talking about the open game license for 5th edition. I'm going to give just the shortest little blurb about it, but I might ask Shawn to elaborate in a moment. But the open game license is basically what allows third-party creators that are not Wizards of the Coast to create content for 5th edition using their rules system. And it's why you end up with adventures like Dungeons of Drakkenheim and settings like Grimhollow. Now, there is a rumor going around that was started by the YouTube channel Indestructo Boy, who I, for the record, don't know anything about them. So take this with a grain of salt, but they are claiming that they have heard from a very reliable source to them. Big grains of salt here, just Salt Bay this whole thing.
We heard that they heard from someone who heard.
Yeah, exactly. That's what this sounds like, isn't it? That basically the OGL will not be renewed for 6E, which when you take that statement at face value, seems to suggest that Wizards are taking an anti-third-party attitude towards One D&D / 6th edition, which I think is what is the attitude this rumor kind of wants to stir up.
Yeah.
Bob Worldbuilder posted it on Twitter, which is where I became aware of it, and there was sort of an unfolding conversation that happened there. And then on the Ian World blog, Morris of Morris's unofficial RPG blog, i.e. Ian World, commented and basically said that he tore the video apart in kind-ish words and said that the open game license cannot be revoked, that, this video really isn't anything to comment on. There really isn't any news here, and I can bring up his quotes to read them directly if I need to. But I'm interested to know, Shawn, can you first of all give people a clearer picture of what the open game license is. Joey sort of talked about this a little bit on our PAX Live show, which is on our YouTube channel if you missed that. But for the folks that missed that, what is the open game license? What does it allow third-party creators to do?
All right. So just at face value, it is a way, it's pretty much what you said, Ben. It is a way for people to use the content from the system reference document, which is the SRD, to make your own content, minus the product identity of Wizards of the Coast. So you can use what's in the system reference document to make any sorts of games that you want, tabletop role-playing games, video games, software, things like that are excluded for the most part. So that is stuff you can make, minus the stuff that they have already deemed as their product identity, which includes trade dress, it includes fonts, it includes art, it includes things like that, unless they give you specific permission to use those things in some way, as they did on the DM's Guild. Now, the DM's Guild is an offshoot where they are giving you a little bit extra license to actually use their product identity and their copyrighted material to make your own stuff, as long as it is only sold on the DM's Guild and not sold elsewhere. If you go into the really deep down into some IP and copyright law, there are people out there saying that you could do this anyway, that under fair use and under any sort of copyright laws, Wizards cannot give you the right to do something that you already have the right to do. No one has tested that because nobody has $2 million to throw at lawyers to test that theory. So everyone is working under the assumption that this open gaming license is in fact a license that is viable and that is legal and that you do need. One of the reasons that Morris said that this rumor is wrong is because the person said that the open gaming license will not be renewed. You can't renew something that is irrevocable. So for 3rd edition and for 5th edition, it says right in the license that it is constant. It is irrevocable. So you could, no matter what Wizards of the Coast does for One D&D or 6th edition or whatever we want to call it, you can still publish under this 5th edition open gaming license. There is, unless Wizards of the Coast finds a way to squash their own license that they put out, it's going to be legal. And so therefore, people use the 3rd edition open gaming license to redo 1st edition. And Wizards of the Coast, now it wasn't like a bestseller, but they were doing it and they were putting it out. And Wizards of the Coast never tried to stop that because A, they couldn't, or B, it just wasn't worth their while, or both. I don't know. So what we heard in the video talking about these rumors is someone saying something that we would need a lot more detail to know, even if this person did have a reliable source, one of the 20 people with a C or a president in their title at Wizards of the Coast who can make these decisions. I don't know who they're talking to, but that's where these decisions are going to be made. So this person must have some pretty high up sources, or they are just really passing along a rumor.
Sure.
Yeah, is seemingly what they mean, perhaps, when they say that the OGL won't be renewed. What they might mean is we won't get an updated SRD for 5.5/6, whatever 1D and D ends up being, which I have so many thoughts on this, so I don't know where to. I want to let you guide the conversation. We'll see.
just to clarify, so that folks know the difference, because I often just in conversation use SRD and OGL kind of almost interchangeably, whether it's worth knowing what the specific differences are. The OGL being, about a 1-page document that basically says, yes, you can use our game system except for these fairly specific things. Somebody asked in the chat, can you use creatures as an example? You cannot use like beholders or illithids or even displacer beasts, I believe, in a third-party product unless it's going on DM's Guild, which is, sort of a separate thing. The system reference document is basically text that, and I'm going to give a real layman's explanation of this, so correct me if I'm slightly wrong, but basically it's just a whole bunch of text that's almost a reprinting of half of the player's handbook and the Dungeon Master's Guide and the Monster Manual, And the idea is that you can copy this text specifically into your books or make reference of this text specifically in your products to be able to create, for example, there's the text for the fighter class and one subclass included in there. So I can create a subclass for the fighter that makes reference to the specific rules of a fighter because it's in the SRD. I can say, you find this magic item in my adventure that's third party because that magic item is listed in the SRD. But anything that's not in the SRD, even if it's one in one of the other rule books, you cannot include, which trips people up, including myself, some of the time. And I'm always, when I'm writing third-party content, have the SRD open, constantly referencing, because like, I believe Searing Smite is like one spell that's not in the SRD.
SRD.
But most other spells
the level
are.
1 smites aren't in the SRD.
Right. Okay.
Correct.
There you go. That's what it is. It's all the level 1 ones. So you can get caught up, in the specifics of what's in there.
So basically, the SRD, like you're saying, is you. Okay. When it comes to copyright, you cannot copyright things like the existence of a 20-sided die and the idea that you roll the die and a higher number is better, and the idea that you add extra numbers to that die. You can't copyright those mechanic ideas. You can't copyright the idea of there being a spell that you can cast that creates a fireball. You can't copyright the idea that that spell does a bunch of D6's worth of damage, right? You can't copyright a lot of these things. But what you can copyright is the phrasing of it, the structure of it, the way that it looks in the book, certain keywords used together. You can copyright kind of the I guess, for lack of a better term, the user interface of those things. And the SRD makes those things really simple because it just says, here's a champion fighter, here's all these mechanics, which if you were to string all of those mechanics together into a class together and call it the champion, that would be getting into infringement territory, right? But this says, you can stick all these things together and it's fine. You can use that. And the OGL just allows you to use those system reference documents. And so the OGL, it's an open game license. It's kind of like in software. There is a lot of stuff that is developed under open source software, right? Like OBS for streaming. And it basically just says, you know what? We're going to let you use any of this stuff that we reference here. This is a license that we have created that you can use, and you can't take it back afterwards. You can't say, oh, we've made this license. Actually, we've changed our mind, and anyone who's used the license since then is now in trouble. You can't do that.
Sure.
So the license exists. The SRD exists, but they may not continue to add more things to the SRD. Is kind of the crux of the whole thing.
So with One D&D and 6E, as I insist on calling it from now on, since, again, we still need more of this. No, please go on.
I forgot what made me start saying all that in the first place. The idea of the creatures, right? So the idea of mind flayers. Mind flayers are intellectual property. You can't use mind flayers in your game. But what you can have are tentacle-faced psychic guys who will eat your brains, and you can write your own mechanics for that, and you can very closely reflect it without infringing, right? It's that game of copyright chicken, and like Shawn was saying, it's just a matter of do you have the money to back you up? Because Hasbro does, and if they decide to sue you, that's where you start getting into trouble. But the thing that I think a lot of people aren't, a lot of people are kind of talking on this who don't necessarily know what they're talking about. I'm about to be one of them. So I've seen a lot of sort of kerfuffle around it.
I know what this works.
I've seen a lot of people sort of using as an example the idea that now we've got these spell lists, right? The primal spell list, the arcane spell list that we've seen in the playtest material. And how can we reference those without getting sued if they're not in the system reference document, even if we're using the 5th edition system reference document? But you can use the word primal, right? And some people were saying, all right, but I'm not going to risk getting sued by using something like that. But I do think that people need to keep in mind that on the other end of the things, it would be a really reckless thing to just assume that no one is going to take them on in court, right? Because if they take it to court, they risk setting a legal precedent. And we've seen this in so many other areas. There was a famous case in the 80s with Atari suing a bunch of MIT kids who were doing ROM hacks of, Missile Command and Pac-Man and thing. You've got You've got cases recently from YouTube reactors who, it just over and over again, fan fiction. The Organization for Transformative Works came out of a court case that said, no, this is sufficiently transformative that we think it falls under fair use, even if it is a commercial endeavor, right? And so then that creates a line and a legal precedent that allows other people to keep doing the same thing afterwards. So companies like Hasbro don't want to take these things to court unless they're sure that the other person won't take it all the way, because they have to settle. Otherwise, they create an open door for everyone else to use. That's something that I wanted to say.
And a corollary to that is a company that would be big enough to go to court with Wizards of the Coast. If they do get this and say we can use this content in any way we want, they're setting themselves then up to have someone do that to them. And so now I can go to the company that sued Wizards to get the rights to do that, and I can do that to that company, and it goes right on down the line. So everything is a big open sandbox, which for some people would be wonderful, and for some people would destroy their livelihoods. So it's a careful balance. But you said the H word, which is very important here. You said Hasbro. When this open gaming license started in 2014, and when the DMs Guild went up, D&D wasn't even a blip on Hasbro's bottom line radar. They didn't care. They cared about Magic because Magic made a lot of money. D&D, not so much. Now, D&D is one of the central pillars of Hasbro. Hasbro wants D&D to become $1 billion industry like Magic is. And in order to do that, they have to pay more attention to things. So the open gaming license, this one-page document that is hard to read and could not even legally stand up in most cases, was just thrown out there to get it out there. Now it has 27 sets of eyes on it instead of one set of eyes. And now there's people asking, how much money did this Kickstarter make that uses our system? $2 million this Kickstarter made? How much of that are we getting? Say the people who didn't care about this 10, 15 years ago. And now the scrutiny is going to cause interesting ripples throughout the legal open game license space going forward.
Looking at the One D&D playtest so far that we've seen, it seems to be, and again, we need to see more of it before anything definitively could be said, but it does seem to be a little bit less backwards compatible than they initially suggested, at least with the way that the expert classes are set up. And they've indicated the arcane and warrior classes, I think they're called, and maybe the primal classes. No, I think it's just arcane. Anyway, not the point.
Expert.
The point being, expert. Thank you. The point being that they are, they function very differently to how like a 5th edition version of those classes necessarily function, meaning that it's potentially harder to write subclasses for those classes in new supplements. And this is hypothetical rather than a statement, or a hypothesis rather than a statement. So maybe I'll phrase it like a question. Would it make it harder to make subclasses in a campaign setting guide book if they do not do a new SRD that addresses the language of 1D&D and 6E directly?
I think... Yeah, I think the answer is going to be yes. It will definitely be harder to do something that they're trying specifically to stop you from doing.
Harder for them to do, or harder for outer parties to do, I guess.
Well, harder for outer parties. I mean, look, maybe that's getting into the weeds a little bit. Let me ask a broader question, which is Gabe and Shawn and Dael, for that matter, as third-party creators. Does this rumor in any way worry you, regardless of the truth of the specific rumor, or just the idea that Hasbro is more hostile to the idea of third-party content? Does this discussion worry you?
Me, not at all. None of this, as someone who works in this industry, any of this being a hypothetical possibility from a huge business is not at all surprising. And so many people play 5e, just like so many people still play 3.5, just like so many people still obsess over 4th edition. And the people who want to play them are going to keep playing them. That is not going to change, especially with the huge surplus of content that is out there. There'll be the people who are like, I don't like 1D&D, so I don't play it. And there'll be the people who continue to play 5e, where all that still exists. Also, the idea that a company considers changing the way that a license works with a new version even if it's only slightly different, to not make a new license when you release a new product is something that almost no major company will do. There is always something that they want or need to change after 7 years have passed that they're going to update something. And with the existence of DM's Guild, where stuff can be recognized and published and have access to more of that, the idea of not utilizing that feels like it should be shocking to more people, in my opinion. Like if you see DM's Guild and people can make Wild Beyond the Witchlight content day of and post it and it's fine, the idea that like WotC wouldn't utilize that almost feels hard to view it as like a weird or shocking or wild thing, because it's like they're going to keep paying themselves, understandably. So like if they have a better way to utilize that, and then people still get the ability to make things for their game, and it's like, to be honest, it's marketing that they get paid for, it's going to happen. And it's also about the stuff that you sell. The stuff that you sell is the stuff that's majorly going to be an issue. But a lot of people make free content for D&D in general, utilizing a lot of that stuff. And very rare is it actually an issue, because you're producing something, not selling something. And that is also a large part of what like license stuff from a legal standpoint comes into be in a conflict. It's the idea of selling a product versus providing something for people to consume. Like parody.
Yeah.
Lawyer father for the win.
Woo! Team lawyer father.
Yeah.
Could you tell that we have strong feelings?
Yes.
But I think that's exactly it. And I think that if anything comes to a really drastic change, that it will be something along those lines, that they'll just want to have more of a control over what the community is producing and selling in connection with D&D, which they would do, you know, in connection with DM's Guild, or potentially in the end, depending on what goes on with the Roll20 whole situation, you know, they could end up creating their own platform through D&D Beyond for people to sell D&D stuff that they get a cut off, right? I wouldn't think it would be completely out of the realms of possibility for that to happen. But even then, right, you have all these third-party publishers who are their own brand identities now. They are independent identities that currently are making stuff in connection with D&D. But I know, like, for example, MCDM, it's no secret that Colville has been saying for ages that at some point they want to produce their own tabletop RPG, right? And if D&D eventually takes away the option to make D&D stuff, I think a lot of the brands who have been publishing third-party content have enough of a following now, enough of a brand identity, that they can just make their own thing. And we've seen this before, right? Like when 4th edition came out, we saw this kind of decentralized tabletop RPG ripple effect, where you just ended up with a lot of other companies and games that got a little bit of a lift out of it. And sure, it'll never kill D&D, it'll never take down the monolith, but I don't think that it's necessarily a bad thing. Dang it, Dael, you got me going. Something else that's like, rumors are weird, because rumors are often something to try to get a reaction out of someone, or like, it's like, if this is something that is hypothetically happening, right? And we're getting playtest rules of One D&D now, do people like think this is going to happen in 3 months, or like in the next, like, we don't even have the movie yet. We are sure as heck not going to get a new edition of this, taking away people's ability to create things for this system before the new movie comes out. Now, if something, and that's what, next year of like March, something 31st. Like that.
Yeah, it got pushed back.
Mm-hmm. And
I remember
if they released something for One D&D around then, that's still 5 months ahead. And that might be when an announcement for something like that comes up. But the idea, a fear about a change in license for a new product should only be concerning if you're going to stop playing the old product. If you like 5e and you want to keep playing 5e, the rules on the new thing aren't necessarily applicable unless you exclusively wanted to play the new thing. Does it? People who love 3rd edition 3.5 can still play the heck out of it. And with the One D&D rules, there's no doubt that people will still be playing 5th edition stuff because they might like a subclass. Like I'm a sucker for the Drake Warden. So if you tell me I get to play a Dragon Rider, heck yes, I'm in it. If that's not in like the One D&D stuff, I might not want to play a Ranger, but I might play a Ranger in 5th edition. Like that stuff stays with you. If it's a concern because you're automatically throwing away something that you already enjoy now, I feel like that's a whole separate conversation. And trying to make people think about it is trying to scare people to stop enjoying a thing they already enjoy.
Yeah. And I also think that a lot of us, I mean, maybe I'm just speaking out of my butt here, but, certainly I, as a person who was once a diehard Xbox fan, I'm used to the idea of backwards compatibility not being everything it promises, right? Yeah. So when they said this new version will be compatible with 5e, I had in the back of my head, yes, but when Xbox said that, they meant you can play the old Halo games. On the new console. They didn't mean that every game you ever bought is going to still work.
Right.
So I read that immediately as, so adventure books are still going to be relevant. They don't want to mess up the adventure books. When the adventure book asks for an athletics check, that will still make sense given the new rule set. So I think maybe I'm just extrapolating, but I think a lot of other third-party people probably did a similar thing and read that and went, things are going to change. But that doesn't mean that you can't publish around it.
First of all, Dael and Gabe, very smart stuff. Totally right on. I am worried, not for people that want to publish on the DM's Guild or make their things. I'm worried for Ghostfire Gaming. Because Ghostfire Gaming is someone who Wizards might be looking at and saying they've made all these products and dice and boxes, and they're a publisher and a producer of big stuff, and they make, they can employ however many number of people. How are they adding to our success? Are they adding to our success, or are they taking away from our success? And I can see people, again, with the C in their titles, right? CEO, CFO, COO, going, are they a plus for us or a minus for us? And if they're a minus for us, how can we make them a plus for us? Is it by requiring a fee if you want to sell something via Kickstarter, use our license via Kickstarter? Those sorts of things are the level that I'm worried at. I don't necessarily have to be worried. Maybe it's an opportunity rather than a roadblock. But until we know the details, rumors are great and they're fun to talk about, but it's the devil in those details that I'm going to be worried about once I start seeing the actual text on the page.
No, are rumors fun to talk about, or are they scary to talk about?
It's also possible that people make rumors so that you are concerned, and that if you are concerned and then you say something, they don't have to deal with it, because the people who are saying the rumors are not the companies that would be affected. Dael talked about it, designing around things. Hypothetically, let's say you came up with a concept of like words that mean these things related to One D&D, and those are what you put in your adventures, and you're used like fighter or anything like that. And then you say, and like people say, the world's greatest role-playing game instead of saying D&D. There's like absolutely ways around it. I feel like companies like Ghostfire are probably the ones who should be the least concerned, because you have the tools and assets to design around those things.
And you can hire a lawyer.
You have the resources and writing like experience to design around those things, and probably ways to make it engaging or eye-catching enough for people. And you have the audience for it. So I personally feel like you're situated to be in the least worrisome position, because if it's free advertising for that company, they might be like, how do we take their money? But also people love free exposure, especially big business. So if they're like, if you're not taking away from their money because you're not making the same thing that they are, but you're making sure that more people do, all that you're going to be doing is getting more people to buy their rules and pay them for it.
Yeah, I guess that's the question of who views it which way, right? Does a person with C in their name at Hasbro or Wizards look at a company like Ghostfire Gaming and think to themselves, well, they've had to buy a monster manual, a DMG, and a player's handbook, so we've sold more, and miniatures from WizKids potentially, so we've sold more? Or do they view it as, well, they bought Dungeons of Drakkenheim instead of Tomb of Annihilation, so they're taking money away from us, you know? It's kind of... Arguments can go in both directions.
It's weird.
Exactly.
It's totally weird.
Exactly.
And I mean, they could always try to have their cake and eat it too, and try to go off. But I think the ultimate thing is the risk, like I mentioned before, of like reckless lawsuits that could end up with legal precedent that they don't want. Plus the terrible, terrible negative publicity of going after a company like Ghostfire, right? Like you have a dedicated following of fans who love your stuff. The impact of it's Disney suing a preschool, right? It doesn't look good. So even if they did it, I think they would quickly realize that it was a bad idea.
I would have instead said, I also wouldn't be shocked if they did the license thing, because a license is an easy way to make money. But Disney suing a preschool is going to live in my soul forever.
I feel like we're having like a therapy session for Ghostfire Gaming now. We're getting built up, then
Ghostfire.
Getting knocked down. It's like, I wouldn't be worried at all, you preschoolers. Great. Yeah, cool. Interesting discussion, and kind of just ties into more of the anxiety, I suppose, felt by the community. And I don't even necessarily mean anxiety in a bad way. Another word you could use is excitement over what's going to happen with a new edition coming out, what that's going to look like, especially given D&D's kind of track history of edition changes usually spelling big changes within the industry with what happened around 4E and 5E.
I'm going to go take some medicine for my excitement.
Yeah. yeah, exactly. All right, let's push on. Speaking of news within the industry very quickly, last time I brought this up, nobody shared much excitement, but I thought I'd just throw it out there again. Dragonlance. Yeah. There's been a couple. Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Gabe.
Gabe's got your back.
It's nice to feel supported. Dragonlance, there's been a couple more previews for this, including the first chapter of the book has been previewed, of the adventure book, specifically Shadow of the Dragon Queen. And they've talked about how the campaign does not try to present war or the concept of war as a fun time for anybody. So the campaign starts in the town about to be burned Downsville, by the sounds of it, which is basically like, let's make this town seem as pleasant as possible with a fishing competition and a fete, and everybody's having a good time, and then let's burn the thing down when dragons invade. Seems to be the pitch they're going for their first chapter. I'm into it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it seems up your alley, yeah.
Yeah. It doesn't sound anything at all like the Tyranny of Dragons opening with... Oh, wait, yes, it does. It sounds exactly like that.
Well, that's what I wondered.
Except it's already in progress in Tyranny of Dragons. You don't get to see the nice village before it's being overrun by the dragon army. Yeah. Right.
The other difference is now it's a shadow instead of a horde. Of the Dragon Queen. The other thing about this that I thought was interesting was the tie-in board game Warriors of Krynn, which they have touted as being kind of compatible with a game of the campaign. So you can be playing 5e, and then at specific points in the story, you crack out Warriors of Krynn to play out a large-scale battle scenario, which isn't it's kind of weird the way they've described it. And the article that I was reading said it's easier to describe by what it's not. So it's not a role-playing game. It's not a war game. By the sounds of it, it's sort of, you start at as single characters who watch the battle unfold, and the battle will sort of unfold on its own, but you can influence it by trying to help people escape the battle or bolstering a certain flank of the battle, I assume, or something like that. I haven't done this a lot, though I've been very interested in it. Basically stopping a 5e campaign to then play a different game. Are folks here fans of that idea? Have you done it before?
I have. I love that. I like it because it changes the pace, or like it like resets the pace, or like it kind of reels everyone back in. Like if someone was sitting back and role play or not feeling as engaged in a moment, this is a new chance to opt into something that's happening that they might feel like they're able to engage with more, or they have a better idea, lean into it. It's like that idea of like the reason hypothetically, part of the reason that we end up making so many other like 5e related tools is so that we can have an experience different from what's already rules is written. So like this is just their way of doing that to me on like a bigger scale. And it's going to have a learning curve, but it's for the people who know this game, know it well. And like there's almost assuredly going to be stuff that totally just relates to that. But like I'm excited to see how well it transitions. Like, can we just dive into this, or is it like, okay, now we got to take like 15, 20 minutes to set this up? That's the thing that's going to make me curious.
Yeah.
Because I feel like already, like 5e in particular is just not built for things like large scale warfare. It's not built to handle that. So no matter how you approach it, you're already going to have to stop playing D&D 5e
unless
and do
you're
a
playing
different thing.
MCDM's Kingdoms and Warfare.
Unless you're playing MCDM's Kingdoms and Warfare, perhaps.
Which I might have wrote on, which is why I wanted to mention it.
But it's wonderful.
I'm curious.
Good job. Yeah, but no, you have to stop and you have to play something other than normal D&D. And whether that be a hack, whether it be MCDM, whether it be a board game, you're going to have to stop and do something else if that's what you want to achieve. So I think it's a great way of handling it.
For a game that comes from wargaming roots, the role-playing game has never been really great at integrating these large-scale combats. Mm-hmm. They've tried to make systems over the years. There was Battle System, I think that was for 2nd edition maybe, that was supposed to do this. So it's been promised to us many times, and it's rarely come to fruition, at least in a Wizards of the Coast TSR published product. But listening to Wes Snyder talk about it on that video, it sounds like they've really tried to make it something where even though you're switching gears and you're going to go off and play the board game is created in a way that there are scenarios in there that are going to match up with the adventure itself. That's so if you're in this part of the adventure, and it says go to scenario 6 in the board game and play this out. If you can do that well, even if it takes a few minutes to set up, the players are going to not feel like, oh, we're playing a different game now. We're playing the same game in a different way, which can be very exciting. Even for people that maybe, I'm not into board war gamey type things, but this affects my character in this real role-playing game I'm playing. So I'm going to pay attention and take a little extra time and care in learning how to play this other game.
I'm really curious how it's going to transition in how the players are controlling something. Like, am I controlling an entire unit that my character is inside of? And like, if so, I'm not throwing them into the front lines. Hell no. You can do it, but like, what I'm really curious to see what the in-game benefits are to this experience, and what the in-game consequences are to this experience. Because like, I'm already like, if my character dies, like whatever, I signed up for that. But then I'm going to feel bad if like my character dies and also like these 100 other people that were like fighting alongside him. That I'll feel bad about, because that's also like, TLDR, it's going to be really cool how it manifests. It's also, I have no doubt, going to be a very interesting experience for the DM who has to react to how the battle went. Because even if it's like, if you win this, if you lose this, yes. But like, what if you won and every unit except that squad died?
Yeah. Depression. Yeah. And the idea that, I mean, it sounded from what Ben was saying that you might be playing as sort of individuals within this broader scale of combat, which is really interesting to me, because isn't that kind of how D&D started? That it's like tabletop RPGs came out of this idea of wargaming, where people were like, but what if my soldier like had a story? What if he had a family and a goal? And you know,
someone pointed out the war game, like Warhammer had a role-playing game, and that blew my mind.
You didn't know that?
No.
They got a couple.
Mm-hmm.
The first time I ever heard about tabletop RPGs was Rogue Trader, which is a Warhammer.
That's what they said. Look, I'm shocked.
I mean, it doesn't surprise me at all who started with war games and I should have been playing role-playing games as a teenager, but I was playing Warhammer 40K and writing reams and reams of like fan fiction on my one dude who I put like all my effort into painting because he's like my military leader. And then this other unit that I'm really fond of, I create a backstory for as well. And they're like the special gung-ho dudes. You know, you kind of
that's nice.
If you're drawn into the storytelling part, I mean, I the way that I play war games is that I prefer to play them as story, not sport, if that makes sense. And a lot of the tournament kind of way of playing war games, which gets a lot of the sort of publicity and the reputation of the game, is playing as sport, is going to a tournament and trying to win, which is a perfectly fine way of playing. But I can see how that transition just naturally happened, where somebody was like, how can I create a story for my one dude who I really care about, and then seeing how that happened back the other way, where it's like, well, what if my one dude was in like a bigger battle and like how
and you know what else, coming at it from the other direction as well, we're so primed for it right now in terms of where board games are at. You know, the legacy campaign style board gaming has come so far in the last 5 or so years, and probably even a little bit more now. Time is moving too quickly, but you know, we've got all these campaign style games, and you can pull on those writers to make something that fits really well with the idea of a game that has lasting consequences, like one that would tie into D&D. I think it's a really cool idea.
Well, I think the one thing, anytime that I've tried or experienced like those sort of mini games or even maxi games within a role-playing system or a role-playing campaign, is just to do it more than once, so that the players have the opportunity to learn how to play this new game. And then if they don't quite get the experience out of it the first time, the second time they get to play the game. Because the experience of learning a new game can often be not about making choices, but about kind of doing what the game is telling you to do to understand how the system works. Does that make sense? So if you're in a role-playing game, which is full of making choices, how do you want to approach this door? How do you want to approach this NPC? In what way do you speak to, et cetera, et cetera? It can be jarring to very suddenly just have the DM need to lead you through the steps of this game to be like, well, what you could do is this or this, but really what you want to do is this because this is the optimum kind of choice. And war games have that optimum choice aspect to them a lot more. And so getting to experience that system within a role-playing game more than once helps capture the feeling of we are influencing how this large-scale battle is going, or this war over a series of campaigns is going, because we're affecting more than one battle and we're not just being led through it to understand the rule system.
Which is like why Kingdoms and Warfare was designed to be able to be played on its own so that you can learn the system before you actually try to implement it in a campaign.
Well, speaking of implementing things in campaigns, we are going to implement the end of this episode of the Eldritch Lorecast.
That one was really rough.
But it's an ongoing campaign, so we will be back next week. So you can come find us then. Gabe Hicks, thank you so much for joining us. Where can folks find you if they want to learn more about the Session Zero role-playing system?
You can find me pretty much anywhere on the internet at Gabe James Games, Twitch, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram. I did claim the Tumblr, but that's not where my Tumblr is, and you'll never find it. That's it.
Last week in the chat, everyone was revealing what my Tumblr address is, and I was like, we don't talk about the Tumblr.
It's like Bruno. I get it. I understand. Cool. Yes, go check out Gabe's stuff. Go follow them. If you want to follow us, keep the conversation going. Our handles are just below our name as usual. If you're watching this on YouTube, if you're on an audio platform, Spotify, iTunes, whatever it may be, make sure to leave us a rating. Tell your friends about the Lorecast, because we will be back next week, as every week, with another episode. I've been Ben Byrne here with Shawn Merwin, Dael Kingsmill, Gabe Hicks, and I will see you next time.